News, because you matter.
Only on Fox 6, criminals, consider yourself warned.
Yeah, freedom is not the only thing you'll end up giving if you're arrested. A new law may require you to give up some DNA.
Yeah, the hope is to take a big chunk out of the state's unsolved crimes.
But our Ben Handelman says not all those samples that end up at the state crime lab will come from those who are convicted.
On the west side of Madison is a nondescript building. It may not look like much. While it has the signs of any normal office, don't be fooled. For the first time to the public,
so we can swing around.
Fox 6 cameras are given an exclusive tour. These are all empty now and this will be full?
Yes.
Of a place being called a game changer.
When you think of the scope of science, it's been pretty recent that we've been analyzing DNA the way we have.
Jennifer Noggle is a data bank supervisor with the State Crime Lab. In this nearly finished lab, there is excitement building.
We've run out of room. We needed more room basically to process everything.
The work that will be done here represents what is being called the largest DNA collection expansion in the state's history.
For us specifically in this unit, it's just providing investigative leads, and that's really our goal, is to do that type of service.
On the other side of the building, DNA swabs are tested. All of the samples are provided by first-time felons.
We are one of the leaders in the nation.
Brian O'Keefe with the Department of Justice explains the important work done here.
We talk to our scientists here about it all the time. When the young lady is walking through the mall, texting and her head down, she doesn't realize that the night before she was never sexually assaulted because of the great work the scientists did the week before identifying a guy who's now off the street.
Every time a new felon is convicted, a swab is taken from the inside of their cheek. It is tested here where analysts create a DNA profile. Using a database, scientists look to see if that DNA was found at the scene of an unsolved crime.
There's a big camera staring at me while I want to be on the news.
Just last week, Omar Aldape made his first court appearance in Racine County.
Short of a homicide, I can't imagine suffering anything worse.
Aldape is accused of a heinous sexual assault from 2013. In Milwaukee County, Johnny Bynum is charged with second-degree sexual assault for a crime from 2007. Both men were forced to provide a DNA sample for unrelated drug felony convictions. When those samples were tested, both had positive hits on their now more serious charges. Due to a big change, it is likely many more of these cases are on the way.
We will save lives. We will save people from becoming sexual assault victims, shooting victims, because of the evidence that's collected out there.
In April, felons will no longer be the only ones forced to give up their DNA. The collection is expanding and will now include all criminal misdemeanor convictions as well.
Gary Ridgway was the Green River Killer out in Seattle, most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. If the rules in place now and the technology we have in place now were in place back in the early 80s, literally 60 to 70 women would be alive, because the only thing he ever had was a misdemeanor conviction for prostitution.
These will all get full.
An explosion in the number of samples sent to Madison is expected. Currently, with just felons' DNA samples, the lab creates 10,000 to 12,000 profiles a year. Of those samples, more than 550 positive hits were made on unsolved cases. With the new DNA expansion, the number of samples could jump to an estimated 60,000 samples per year. The result on unsolved crimes could climb into the thousands.
That kind of power to save that many lives, save that many sexual assaults, is incredible.
The expansion, however, is not without controversy.
I think there's a strong contingent of us that would say until their due process rights have been exhausted in the court system, they should maintain something as personal as DNA.
David Craig is a Republican state representative from the town of Vernon. Also included in the law, for the first time in the state's history, DNA swabs will be taken from suspects who are accused but not yet convicted of a violent crime.
We have a job as public policy officials to balance security and safety versus individual liberty for people who haven't had their day in court.
Craig says an even more expansive plan was first introduced by the governor. When the idea was introduced in 2013, the idea of taking a person's DNA without a conviction did not sit well with some conservative Republicans. As a compromise, the list of offenses where DNA can be collected upon arrest was knocked down to just the most violent crimes on the book.
One's personal autonomy, one's privacy, it can get eroded, by 1,000 cuts.
The ACLU of Wisconsin is not happy.
Charges are very often changed from the time of arrest until you get to the preliminary hearing. And what do they do in situations where the charge is no longer on the list of offenses that lead to DNA collection?
Executive Director Chris Amudi has a laundry list of issues with the new law. At the top, privacy concerns, especially for those whose DNA is collected, but the suspect is never convicted.
The state of Wisconsin is definitely not ready for this.
The state says samples collected upon arrest will only be tested when probable cause is established. If a suspect is never convicted, after a year, their sample will be removed.
There's no record you were even here. It's all gone. The samples are destroyed.
Other issues raised by the ACLU: if the state can afford the influx of new samples, and if the explosion will cause a backlog of work that will drag out turnaround times, a past problem at the state crime lab.
Frankly, I wonder if the criminal justice system is really up to the task.
Absolutely ready. The governor and the legislature were very good. They gave us the resources to go forward.
In anticipation of the increase in caseload, the Department of Justice has hired 21 new employees. DNA analysts are already trained and will begin moving into their new lab next week.
People who don't commit crimes are not going to have their DNA in our database. That's just the way it is.
An expansion that may be a cold case killer being watched very closely.
And we are a piece of this pie of your case. We are a sliver. But yeah, sometimes if that's all that you've got, the realization of what we do every day is very important. And everyone takes it very seriously.
In Madison, Ben Handelman, Fox 6 News.
The state says your DNA is basically the same as your fingerprint, and the Supreme Court has backed them up on that. The nation's highest court ruled in 2013 law enforcement can take DNA upon arrest. Now, there have also been a number of questions raised about how the state will pay for the expansion. The Department of Justice says fees for swabs and testing are paid by offenders, and that will make the program self-sufficient.